Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Questing with Drak, where we continue on in the Dragonflight storyline. So previously we covered the first bit of content to drop from that, which was the Dracthyr starting zone, and the next things to drop actually are more relevant to bringing everybody else up to speed, especially if you are new players, into the story of Dragonflight, and that is the WoW Legacies short videos that were released by Blizzard on YouTube as well as their own sites. For those who don't know, since Warlords of Draenor, Blizzard has tried to put out these motion comic minis, kind of like mini novellas, to explain some of the characters that you might be going into or need to know about them before you go into the story. So for example, with Warlords of Draenor, we learned a lot about the warlords. With Legion, we discovered more about some of the characters we'll be dealing with, as well as the moments leading up into the Legion invasion. And in Battle for Azeroth, we learned about pivotal characters like Jaina and Ajara, and also with the Shadowlands, we learned about the world, the various afterlives we were going to go and experience. And in Legacies, they have decided to bring people up to speed with the Dragon storyline to give new players at least a minimum amount of information to be able to walk into the Dragon Isles and not feel totally lost. And the way that they decide to do this is actually through Scale Commander Emberthal. If you remember her from the Dracthyr starting zone, she kind of appeared out of nowhere, wasn't really a part of anything. And what's funny is that ultimately later on, she's going to become a bigger part of the story. So at that point, they used the Legacies to be able to incorporate her into the stories. Starting with her basically, the way the timeline is set is that we've all gone to the Alliance and the Horde to go get aid for the Dragon Isles, but Emberthal has stayed behind on the Forbidden Reach, probably to look for any remaining memories to be able to help with her amnesia. And she comes across the Bronze Dragon aspect, Nozdormu, who is trying to find answers of his own, honestly. He's trying to figure out where the Dracthyr way into the Time Ways and how they're going to help combat this new threat that they might be facing with Raszageth. And through meeting Emberthal, he then decides to journey with her and also explain maybe what's happened during that time that she doesn't know, because obviously there are a lot of gaps in her memory. So the first two episodes are based on events that we already did know, that are established in the lore. And then the third is going over the lore that's missing. In particular, what Emberthal and the Dracthyr were doing up until they were imprisoned. So the first, let's go over these episode by episode. Episode 1, I like to call Dawn of the Aspects because it primarily sets up the story of Emberthal and Nozdormu meeting, and also showcasing who Nozdormu is to Emberthal so that she can understand who she's speaking with. And by the way he does that is by showing the origin of the aspects themselves, how they were once 5 proto-drakes who rose up against the threat of Galakrond, who is a massive proto-drake who posed a great threat to the balance of dragonkind as well as to Azeroth itself, and how they banded together and ultimately, after defeating Galakrond, were bestowed a blessing by the Titan Keeper Tyr to become the aspects that we know of them today, for them becoming Alexstrasza the Lifebinder, Ysera the Dreamer, Malygos the Spellbinder, Nozdormu the Timeless One, and Neltharion the Earthwarder. The second episode I tend to call Neltharion's Fall, because at that point it goes over the history of Neltharion and how he fell from becoming the Black Dragon aspect and transformed into Deathwing the Destroyer, the Black Dragon that we all know and ultimately destroyed in the Cataclysm. And also, obviously, Emberthal has some questions about this as to whether or not he was the real villain, and it's understandable why she would ask these things, but Nozdormu is showing her the truth of the events, including the creation of the Dragon Soul, otherwise known as the Demon Soul, and then ultimately his destruction at the end of the Cataclysm, and the sacrifice that was required in order to end him. Which, for those who don't know, the aspects had to forsake or sacrifice their aspectral power in order to destroy him completely. So up until this point, they have been powerless, and their flights have diminished because of it. But it also helps to showcase what Deathwing was actually ultimately dealing with and why he became a threat, showcasing that he is listening to the whispers of the old gods, and that they kind of pointed him in the direction to be able to defeat the demons with the dragon soul and to betray his once allies and in turn ultimately be destroyed by them. The third episode is something more, as Nozdormu finally is able to get Emberthal to recover her lost memories. They learn of the Dracthyr being this noble peacekeeper army for Neltharion, except with a couple of interesting details now added in. It doesn't seem like the Dracthyr have a will of their own, as Neltharion is wielding a mysterious Titan relic as a glove, and in turn it looks like he is able to control all of them with said Titan relic. While he is doing so, Raszageth actually attacks the Forbidden Reach, and we see the moment of the destruction of the Adamant Vigil. So for those who were wondering why I didn't cover this right in the previous episode, I actually didn't remember this, and I'm kind of happy I went back to this legacy to find it out, but the initial attack by Raszageth took out Emberthal's entire Wern. So at that point, she is the only one left of the Adamant Vigil. She's not aware of this, but now she is. And then ultimately, Neltharion, seeing the chaos, selling his soul to the old gods in order to imprison Raszageth, and because of his actions, either beseeching Malygos or Malygos ultimately intervenes on his own and imprisons the Dracthyr in stone, which is how we come to be when we actually get into the starting zone. Now, Emberthal does not take this well, and I don't think any of us would if we were direct creations and then we found out that ultimately, because he sold his soul to the devil, so to speak, he ultimately forgot we existed. And that's probably for the best, and even Nozdormu helps with the lament, but that also kind of points out maybe he had good reasons for doing so. Maybe he saw what you might become, maybe he saw the threat you might pose to him. There's a number of possibilities there, but in so doing, I actually think Nozdormu has created what I like to call Neltharion's final sacrifice, which is his last heroic act before becoming the monster that we know as Deathwing the Destroyer. And I know that that's glorifying this and kind of rewriting history here, but ultimately this history isn't very well known. So at that point, it's not really rewriting history, it's filling in the gaps. And I do think it actually gives Emberthal something to hold on to be able to continue to be better and to be able to rise above her history and in turn become the hope that Nozdormu sees in the Dracthyr. My final thoughts on these legacies are they are great. I love how they were able to portray some of the events of the various legacies episodes, and in fact, if people want to know more, I would recommend for episode 1, if you want to know more about the conflict with Galakrond. Just so happens that there is a book called Dawn of the Aspects, which is actually available on audible.com. You guys can check it out there. And for Neltharion's Fall, there's a number of lore videos online, specifically at YouTube, that go into the fall of Neltharion, into Deathwing, and also the story itself of the Cataclysm, which is centered around Deathwing and ultimately his destruction. So you have other references to be able to go on. But while all of this is great, my big beef with this is, if people remember, the Dracthyr starting zone is just a touch short, in my opinion. And part of the reason is because where we have these hero class storylines that are huge and filled with lore to be able to bring us up to speed, this one didn't really have it. In fact, the opening zone that you explore throughout most of this, you only explore about 75% of it with the Dracthyr, as opposed to the Demon Hunter and the Death Knight, where you do explore the whole zone and you're sent to the whole zone. So at that point, it's great, but I actually do think that this should have been incorporated into the starting zone experience, with the players following along with Emberthal to discover all of these revelations and in turn inspire the player character to become the hope that Nozdormu sees. And how could we have done that? Well, like I said, only 75% of the Forbidden Reach was ever explored. it's incentivized for you to go and explore because you'd be able to find rewards out of it. But there is actually a point of the map where we could basically say that this is where the Wairn of the Adamant Vigil was. And so at that point, that could be where Emberthal discovers Nosdormu. And we go through these events with her and in turn kind of lament the fact that we were forgotten, but also see what Nosdormu sees in us and strive to be better. I think that you ultimately could have had, you know, a good 5 or 6 quests there that could have led into each other and in turn be able to establish Emberthal a little bit more in the lore, because like I said, she is utilized as one of the main characters within the Dragonflight storyline. So I think that they actually could have done that by letting us explore the old remains of her Wairn, and she then discovers what happened to her Wairn, and we can go from there. So I do like the Legacies. I just really wish they had been incorporated into the starting zone to allow for not only Emberthal herself to have a little bit more meaning in the storyline, but also for us as characters to have meaning in that. The other Hero Quest storyline, or Hero Class storylines, make it so that we are integral pieces of those armies. And this one doesn't really do that. We're just another cog in the machine. So I think that that actually would have ultimately helped this out a little bit more if they were put together. But that's just my opinion. Feel free to leave yours in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this. And when we come back for Questing with Drak, we will start up the actual storyline of Dragonflight by starting up the questing in the Waking Shores. Until then, please like, comment, and subscribe. I definitely appreciate that. It helps the channel out so very much. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the Legacies and whether or not they should have been put in the starting zone experience, or if you have another idea, I'd love to be able to hear it. And also, you guys can check out some of the other content that I provide in the links above. So in turn, I will catch you guys next time for the Waking Shores. And until then, take care, my friends.